Hello and welcome to an Our Fake History digital short. Today we're talking about the double cross that changed the history of professional wrestling. Roll the theme. Hey everyone, my name is Sebastian Major and I'm the host of the Our Fake History podcast. That's the podcast where we explore historical myths and try to determine what's fact, what's fiction, and what is such a good story that it simply must be told. Here on the Digital Shorts, I like to take a little something that we've been exploring on the longer audio podcast and serve it in a more bite-sized video package. On the main show, we've been looking at the wonderfully strange history of professional wrestling in America. Now, one of the eras that I have found particularly fascinating is the 1920s. This is because in the 1920s, even though wrestling matches were mostly scripted or worked, as they say in the biz, real wrestling had a way of creeping in at unexpected moments. Allow me to explain. At the start of the 1920s, the World Heavyweight Wrestling title was controlled by a powerful New York-based promoter named Jack Curley. Curley decided which wrestler would hold the title, which wrestlers could face the champ, and when the champion would lose the title. That was until a small group of conspirators orchestrated a double cross that changed the power structure in wrestling for years to come. In 1921, the World Heavyweight Wrestling Champion was a man named Ed Strangler Lewis. But in that year, he was compelled by Jack Curley to lose his title to a Polish wrestler named Stanislaus Zybszko. But what Jack Curley didn't know was that Ed Strangler Lewis, his manager Big Billy Sandow, and another tough guy wrestler named Joseph Toots Mont were planning a coup to wrest control of the title away from the New York promoter. A few months after the original Zybszko-Strangler-Lewis match, a rematch was scheduled, where Jack Curley was assured that his champ, Zybszko, would once again come out on top. But the Polish wrestler, who had his own gripes with Jack Curley, and who received a nice payoff, unexpectedly dropped the title to Strangler Lewis. With Lewis now in control of the belt, he, Sandow, and Toots Mont started their own promotion group. It was later dubbed the Gold Dust Trio. Now, if only the fans could have known about this crazy double cross. That would have made for some real drama at these matches. But thanks to the unwritten code of secrecy in wrestling, known as kayfabe, this was all kept quiet by everyone involved, even the double-crossed Jack Curley. From the outside, it just looked like Strangler Lewis was once again the champ. In reality, a new promotion group controlled the title, which gave them an edge in the wrestling business, because now only the Gold Dust Trio could legitimately promote a title bout. Now, the Gold Dust Trio's era of dominance only lasted around 4 years, from 1921 to 1925. But in that time, they would bring in a number of notable innovations to wrestling that would make the sport even more theatrical. Toots Mont, in particular, was insistent that if this new promotion group was going to make any money, they needed to create a new, more enticing wrestling product. The result was something he dubbed slam-bang Western-style wrestling. Toots Mont has been credited with inventing many of the ring moves that today are synonymous with professional wrestling. Mont has been given credit for bringing in the drop kick, the body slam, the suplex, and a long list of other showy ring moves. Now, the provenance of some of those moves is disputed, but most wrestling historians agree that Toots Mont was largely responsible for transforming wrestling from a type of mat grappling into the high-flying theater we know today. The Gold Dust Trio also pioneered clever finishes to their matches that were designed to drum up excitement for future events. These included out-of-ring countouts, double countouts due to head bumps, and a routine they called a Broadway, where a match would be called a draw thanks to time running out just as one wrestler was about to win the whole thing. The idea behind these sometimes ridiculous finales was that they set the stage for a rematch. Either no wrestler properly came out on top, or one wrestler could dramatically claim that they lost on a technicality. This was built into a multi-match storyline, or program as it was called. Gold-Dust Trio matches had a vaudeville style, and they tended to end with a bang. And while they controlled the title, wrestling really became a show. But ironically, the men who did so much to move professional wrestling away from its roots in catch-as-catch-can wrestling and towards pure entertainment were ultimately undone by real wrestling. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, allow me to explain. For a number of years, the Gold-Dust Trio kept the title in the hands of Ed Strangler Lewis. Not only was Strangler Lewis a member of the promoting triumvirate, but he was also legitimately one of the best wrestlers in America. There were few men wrestling in the early 1920s who could beat Lewis in a shoot match. That was a legitimate, unplanned wrestling match. Now, this lack of real competition for Strangler Lewis led to a huge turning point in wrestling history. This was when the Gold-Dust Trio started experimenting with non-wrestlers. In their tightly scripted slam-bang matches, it technically didn't matter if a wrestler had any traditional grappling skills. A competitor who looked impressive and had a charismatic personality could be built up through a series of worked matches to come off as a real contender for the title. The first wrestler the Gold-Dust Trio tried this with was a 6'6", 260-pound former college football star named Wayne Big Munn. As his nickname suggests, he was a big man with a football player's build who could come off as convincingly dominant in the ring when paired with a skillful opponent who could sell the encounter. The trio planned out a whole program between Big Munn and Strangler Lewis, where Munn would win the title, Strangler Lewis would get it back, and then, finally, there would be one last showdown. But this program was not able to run to its conclusion. You see, not every wrestler liked the idea of a non-wrestler wearing the belt. Sure, they accepted that the promoters decided who got the title, but there was still an old-school belief out there that the heavyweight wrestling champion should be able to hold his own in an unscripted match. You should be able to wrestle in a shoot. For some, the idea of a trumped-up football player wearing the belt was a bit too much. One of these people was the man who had been so instrumental in the original double cross that had led to the Gold-Dust Trio controlling the heavyweight title in the first place. Stanislaus Zybszko. Despite his 1921 betrayal of Jack Curley, he had kept in touch with the New York promoter. 4 years into the promotional reign of the Gold-Dust Trio, Zybszko was once again ready to switch his loyalties. Not only was there some money involved, but Zybszko had come to resent the management style of the Gold-Dust Trio. In particular, he was annoyed that he had been ordered to lose matches to Big Munn to help enhance the profile of a man who wasn't really a wrestler. In 1925, Zybszko, who was nearing the end of his career, was on deck to wrestle Big Munn one more time. At the time, Munn was still the title holder, and Zybszko was supposed to lose the match to help enhance the profile of the reigning champ before Strangler Lewis could come back and get his revenge. But at that particular match, Stanislaus Zybszko decided that he wasn't going to play by the rules. And in 1925, not playing by the rules meant getting in the ring and really wrestling. Zybszko was the real deal. And when the match started, he threw out the program and turned the match into a shoot. Apparently, before the match started, he ominously said to Munn, quote, "Tonight we wrestle," end quote. It became clear very quickly which of the two men was actually a trained wrestler. Zybszko managed to pin Munn a number of different ways within the first few minutes of the match. But fans became suspicious when the referee seemed unwilling to do the count. Soon, it became clear that the ref was going to need to acknowledge the legitimacy of these pins or potentially reveal that the match was a work. So, on the next pin, the ref counted it out, and Stanislaus Zybszko officially became the World Heavyweight Wrestling Champion. He effectively weaponized kayfabe against the Gold Dust Trio, because to contest Zybszko's win was to admit that the match was supposed to be rigged. A couple of months later, Zybszko dutifully dropped his title to a wrestler controlled by Jack Curley, and the title was effectively Curley's again to control. Now, I'll say it again, this would have been an incredible storyline if the fans had been let in on it. Zybszko changed the wrestling business twice with well-timed double crosses. The fact that one of these double crosses involved actually besting a lesser opponent in a wrestling match? I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. The planned storyline of Big Mun temporarily scooping the title from Strangler Lewis was nothing compared to the real-life story of Stanislaus Zybszko using his true prowess in the ring to make some cash, settle a personal score, and remind the fans that he was truly one of the world's best wrestlers. The brief reign of the Gold Dust Trio would shape wrestling for decades to come. The new levels of showmanship introduced by the promoters would become the standard. But the Zybszko double cross kept wrestling with one foot in the real world for the next decade. You couldn't put the title on just anyone. They needed to be a real wrestler who was strong enough to protect kayfabe. To find out more about the history of wrestling and tons of other strange stories from the past, please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel or subscribe to the audio version of Our Fake History. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.